I'm Julie Zenner along with Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
The last place on earth may be shut down, but that hasn't stopped synthetic drug use. New tools unveiled in Minnesota this week are designed to stem the flow of synthetic drugs.
60 years ago, as the purest iron ore was running out on the range, the industry was betting on taconite to keep mining jobs secure. Tonight, a classic film that laid the groundwork for the transition to taconite.
And we'll bring you the week's business headlines and a news file story from 25 years ago.
It's all coming your way next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. It's a big weekend of entertainment around the region, Denny. We've got the Blues Fest here in town.
Absolutely. Music all weekend long. Tonight, Saturday, Sunday, Blues Fest. A number of communities around here also have music venues and other things going on.
And we've got some interesting topics as well, so let's get started.
Thank you very much, Julie. Welcome, everyone. A special legislative committee on the synthetic drug problem saw some of its most important work rolled out to the public this week. Effective August the 1st, the new law gives the state's pharmacy board the authority to order stores to stop selling the drugs. And a new website was unveiled to help parents and others with questions about synthetic drugs. Joining us now is Representative Erik Simonson, a Democrat from Duluth who chaired the Select Committee on Controlled Substances and Synthetic Drugs, and Dr. Elisabeth Bilden is with Essentia Health St. Mary's Medical Center. Thanks to the both of you for being here tonight. Representative, with these new tools going into effect just a few days ago, have we noticed any change at all that we can measure yet in the flow of synthetic drugs?
Well, you know, here in Duluth, we've certainly noticed a big change with the closure of the last place on earth. Now, that has nothing to do with the new legislation that has passed, but we do feel that the measures that were put into place and that are going into effect now are going to help other communities across the state hopefully avoid a last place on earth situation.
Let's talk about some of those new measures. The Minnesota Board of Pharmacy is going to have some new authority to step in and tell stores to stop selling. Why is that so important? A lot of people don't even know what the Board of Pharmacy is.
Right, so the Board of Pharmacy is a state agency that regulates pharmacies all across Minnesota. And we searched for a unique way to get at the synthetic drug angle. Because as you know, and as a lot of folks know, the problem that we've had is that manufacturers continually find a way around new laws that are passed by changing the ingredients or the chemical makeup of the drugs they're selling. So we tried to seek out something that was unique and a little bit different, that they wouldn't be able to do that. And we think we've found that by utilizing the Board of Pharmacy, who is used to being in situations where they're dealing with controlled drug substances, but this is just a little bit step further, and we've changed the definition of drug to include synthetics. So if there's a store where law enforcement, for example, identifies that the products are being sold, or they think that they're products that are being sold, the Board of Pharmacy can come in and issue a cease and desist order right away and stop the sale of the product.
So if they fail to stop the sale, would the store be forced to close?
Correct. Correct. And
so this has some teeth in it.
It has some large teeth in it, and the really good part about it is it's a lot quicker. As this happens, obviously the legal side of it will continue along, and that takes some time. But this is a quicker, more immediate effect, a positive effect on the community.
Dr. Bilden, as a medical professional who has watched this whole synthetic drug problem unfold in our community, are you optimistic about some of the new measures that have been put together?
Oh, yes, I think anything that we can do to try and stop the use of these and the sale of the synthetic drugs that we're talking about would be helpful. I mean, it sounds like a good addition to the things that have already been done. Sure.
What effects do synthetic drugs have on the body?
So the synthetic drugs, I think, that we're talking about, there are large classes of drugs and many synthetic drugs, but really I think tonight what we're talking about and focusing on are the synthetic cannabinoids, also known as synthetic marijuana, and the bath salts, which are the cathinones. So those two classes work in a similar way, not entirely exactly like, but they work at different places in the brain, but the body responds with an elevated heart rate, high blood pressure, agitation, delirium, seizures. The cannabinoids have been reported to cause strokes. So really significant health effects on individuals, but also on pre-hospital providers, the law enforcement, anybody who's present in the pre-hospital setting and helping to manage, with a patient who's really agitated. Those are the biggest impact that we see.
You've been doing some work with community groups. What are you telling them?
So with the public and also the community groups, where it's really about collaboration and how do we do this. It takes the parents who are involved, and it takes law enforcement, EMS, that anything that we can do to stop drug use in general, and these are just another example. One of the most important things I think in speaking to children and actually in the 20s and 30-year-olds who are using these is that it's not marijuana. It's completely different. It's not the same thing. And really the same message for any drug of abuse and that you're obtaining in illicit drugs is that you don't know what you're getting.
And some of these same messages are the ones that are being put out on this new website, correct?
Right. So in addition to the statutory change we made with the Board of Pharmacy, the other exciting piece that's rolling out is the department just recently, 2 days ago, I think, introduced their latest website. And this website was created with the intent of providing a single source of information out there where folks could turn to for accurate, up-to-date info on synthetic drugs. One of the things that we heard, consistently across the state was from parents especially, where do we turn to for information?
Sure.
Where do we find out what to look for? Where do we find out, what these things look like, what the packaging might look like? Where do we find good information about how to start a conversation with our kids about synthetic drugs and abuse? So the Department of Health and other state agencies involved put together this great website that will provide some really good current up-to-date information.
Doctor, what are some of the signs that parents could look for, that teachers should be on the lookout for?
I think, again, with acute use, it's going to be those things that I mentioned. And really, somebody who's not acting in the same way that they had in the past. We don't know the long-term effects, but certainly in the short term, they may be somewhat fidgety. They may be, again, sort of restless in the home, looking for those packages, looking that, are our kids missing school? The same thing that you look for really with other drugs. I mean, these are illicit drugs that are, in the past, have been more easy to obtain so that they were being used. So again, I think one of the things is behavior change, decreased communication, and trying to open that communication.
Yeah. 30 years ago, Nancy Reagan, First Lady, said, say no to drugs. We still have a drug problem. Are we winning the war on drugs, or are we just barely scratching the surface?
Well, it's debatable. Certainly the things that we have done to stop drug abuse have made an impact to the positive. Clearly, we haven't stopped it entirely, and it's not likely that we ever could. I think that our goal, especially with this particular project, was to slow it down, especially to stop the retail sale, because that's where we saw this misconception out there that if I can walk into a store on Main Street and purchase it over the counter, they believe it to be safe and they believe it to be legal, neither of which was true. So we wanted to stop that piece of it. We know there's more work to be done going forward.
Are we still finding other stores in the state selling synthetic drugs?
We haven't found any new stores that I'm aware of lately, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, I think that anybody that's interested in selling these types of products takes one look at the Jim Carlson case and says, this might just not be worth it.
It seems to me that it might be even more difficult to try to fight the sale of these synthetic drugs on the internet than it is if you have a bricks and mortar location that you can monitor and try to stop. How do you get at that? You've got so many packages that are moving through with eBay and Amazon and opportunities for drugs to slip through?
So the internet is a really interesting animal to try to tackle for the simple reason that controlling anything on the internet it's more than a state issue. It becomes a national issue, and quite frankly, it's an international issue. But we are working on some potential solutions to at least the synthetic drug side over the internet. But we don't have enough information yet on that, but we are making some progress and some headway. So hopefully by the time we come back in 2015, we'll have some options to look at.
Yeah. Doctor asked you a few moments ago what you're telling people about synthetic drugs. Is the community telling the medical community anything? Are they frightened?
You know, I think that they have. I think they've made that clear in general, especially in Duluth when these drugs were available. But I think in general, they tell us when they come in, and parents, and actually not just parents, but family members are concerned about the patients that we're seeing, their family members. And so yes, they're concerned, yes, they're frightened because we don't know the long-term effects as part of it. And these patients tend to be very sick when they're admitted. And when you say, how do we kind of fight the war on drugs? I mean, these patients have a problem with addiction, a lot of them. And the other side of it is the legislation, which helps, and law enforcement. And the other side for us, though, is helping patients who have this addiction and getting them into treatment and helping them and guiding them. And they'll have periods where they end up having trouble again, but then we need to help and be available and make sure that our communities have.
And it's not just young people using drugs, it's parents using drugs, illegal drugs.
Right. Yeah, there was the website put together by the Department of Human Services had a lot of other agencies that were involved, the Hennepin Regional Poison Center, the Minnesota Department of Health, and St. Luke's and St. Mary's. Essentia participated in a study that the Minnesota Department of Health led. And in that study, it was actually a higher, not just teenagers, it was 20s and 30s and even 40s and early 50s that showed the distribution of use. And so it affects certainly children who are at home of those parents.
The situation in Duluth with the last place on earth really seems to have moved synthetic drugs to the front burner in Minnesota, and some good things are happening. Are other states around the country starting to look at Minnesota as maybe a model and asking some questions about what you're doing?
Right. There's been a lot of questions from other states and other legislators from other states. You may recall 2 years ago when I first introduced a bill, we modeled some legislation after a law that was passed in Indiana. And that law in Indiana was challenged in the state Supreme Court, and it's still tied up in court there. So we shifted gears into a different pattern. But we think that what we have now is pretty solid, and we're starting to get a lot of inquiries about, how did you get this done and how does it work? So I think as time goes forward and we see how this thing works out and plays out, that I think it will become a model if it works well.
Any final message as you look at this next step of the battle? The next step, and this is kind of really one of the more important steps that hasn't even come out yet, but when kids go back to school in 2015, one of the things that we've asked the Department of Health and the Department of Education and the Department of Human Services to do is to collaborate and include a synthetic drug awareness program for middle school and high schoolers. So that as they get educated on, the issues revolving around drug abuse, that the synthetic drug comes into the discussion, so that they're aware of it, so that people start to realize how big of a problem it actually is.
All right, Doctor, Representative, thank you so very much. This was a great discussion. Thank you. All right.
Now, let's dig into our news file archive for a look at what was making news 25 years ago this week.
These were familiar waters for the Coast Guard buoy tenders. All 4 ships were built here during World War II. And in a way, they're a reminder of an industry that once employed thousands and is now gone. Since the 1860s, the Twin Ports has built hundreds of ships, but in World War II, production reached a fever pitch. At one point, 5 ships were launched in a single day.
Zenith Dredge Company had 1,500 employees in World War II. Marine Iron Works had 1,200. There were 14,000 people in the Twin Ports employed in the industry during World War II in 6 major shipyards. It was not a small industry.
It was during this time that 13 C-180 buoy tenders were built for the Coast Guard. Originally, they were painted gray and armed for battle in World War II. But when peace came, the ships were repainted and reassigned. 5 are still at work on the Great Lakes, ready to handle any job from ice breaking, chasing drug runners in the Caribbean, to tending buoys.
They have undergone a lot of renewal and restoration and upgrading, but they're going to be with us for a long time to come. They're good ships.
Coast Guard officials say these ships will wear out eventually, but any new ships that are built will look a lot like the originals, made in Duluth. John Schottel, KDLH News.
Minnesota's iron mining industry has had plenty of ups and downs during its 130-year history, but the challenge facing the Iron Range following World War II was unlike the others. With the highest grade ore running out, many feared the mining companies would close up shop. While working with the University of Minnesota, a new kind of iron-bearing rock was being tested, but many in the public remained skeptical. So in 1952, the mining industry put out a promotional film to educate the public on this new product called Taconite. It's a fascinating historic look at the dawning of a new era on the Iron Range, and we've got an excerpt for you. Roll it.
This is State Fair time, Minnesota State Fair time, and the high point of the year for most of us. Yes, folks are here from all over the state, from towns and villages, from cities and hamlets. People from all walks of life meet here together on common ground, friendly, happy, relaxed in the enjoyment of their own state fair. And here are the Petersons. They're farmers. Carl Peterson owns a farm in southern Minnesota, dairy cattle. And brother Fred is a mining engineer. He's worked in iron ore mines all his life. And over the years, he has watched the changes that new developments and new processes have made on the Minnesota Iron Range.
Not many years ago, everyone considered this rock as waste, just troublesome overburden that had to be blasted out to get at the ore. But mining men, assisted by the University of Minnesota Mines Experiment Station, are working out methods to convert taconite into high-grade ore. They hope to do it at a cost to compete with other ores. Much work has been done to process taconite, and there's still more experimenting going on all the time. The process of manufacturing high-grade ore from taconite sounds very simple. It consists of blasting and crushing the rock apart, treating it to separate the waste, and putting what is left back together again. But to do all that on a commercial scale takes lots of money and thousands of men. Just think what it would cost to build and run a commercial taconite plant. Pay many more workers, pay for power and machinery. Somebody has to go out on a limb to the tune of millions of dollars just to find out if it will work. Somebody has made the venture, the mining companies, with the result that taconite processing is no longer a rumor or a dream. It's a fact, though it's only in the experimental plant stage now. How big a commercial activity this may become in Minnesota in the future depends upon whether or not the industry can do this at a cost that can compete with taconite from other states and countries and high-grade ores that are mined in other places. If the industry is able to take the next step, the use of manufactured ores supplemented by reserves of good natural ores, the future of the industry in Minnesota is really bright. This taconite process is simple to tell about, but it involves a lot of ingenuity. Special plants, each one costing a fortune, had to be built throughout the range for research and experimentation to try out different methods. The taconite process begins with the mining of the rock. The drilling machines go to work. A jet-piercing drill operating at temperatures up to 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit burns holes through solid rock for blasting. One shot, and tons of crude taconite, all hard rock, can be torn loose from the earth. The dark streaks in this rock are iron ore, but the ore is in very fine particles, some of them smaller than a speck of dust. To separate the ore particles, the rock has to be crushed and then ground again and again to reduce it to powder fineness. The powdered taconite, mixed with water, goes through a number of processes designed to separate the iron ore from the rock dust. The fine particles of iron ore are pulled out by strong magnets, and the coarser, low-grade material is passed back through the mill for more crushing. But the job is not finished then. Right now, this concentrate is as fine as powder, so fine it can't be loaded and shipped. It has to be put back together again. Now, one way to put the taconite back together is by pelletizing. Make round pellets or marbles of uniform size out of the powder. In pelletizing, the small balls roll out of the drum onto an endless belt which carries them to the furnace. Hot gases bake the pellets hard enough to stand up under the trip to the steel mills. Another method is called sintering. And still another called nodulizing. In this rotary kiln, heat is applied to the powdered taconite. As the binding agent burns out, it leaves a solid lump of iron ore. Each method does substantially the same thing.
Well, that's almighty interesting. But how does this new process of making ore out of rock affect the natural ore we still have in the state?
The great promise of the future lies in the conservation of our iron ore by joining this new development with what we have. Iron ore mining today is really one great manufacturing process in which all types of ores, from the lean taconite rock to the richer natural ores, are used under an overall plan of each producer to provide a tailor-made supply of ore the steelmakers need. We can ensure the future of iron ore mining in Minnesota if we treat our combined iron ore resources as a single source of raw material that has to compete with the products of other regions.
Yes, the mining industry today is a highly specialized manufacturing business that supports, directly and indirectly, nearly 250,000 people. 250,000 people who create a great market for the products and services of many other industries in the state of Minnesota, which benefits all the people in the state. Farming, for instance. The people in the Iron Range country do not begin to grow all the food they eat, so they buy farm products of farms all over the state all the year around. Small and large contractors from all over the state supply timber and other materials and services for the mines. Manufacturers of many kinds sell equipment and machinery and thousands of other items, big and small. And railroad transportation of iron ore provides jobs for many workers. Every school district, your own school district, even the University of Minnesota, benefits directly from the permanent school trust funds built primarily by iron ore taxes and royalties from state-owned mines. Yes, no matter what you do or where you live, iron ore mining benefits you in some way. Hear that? That's an ore train, a symbol of a great Minnesota industry. An industry that helps make busy towns and cities all over the state. Tree-lined avenues of comfortable homes, smiling, happy children. The people in the range country, in almost any one of the towns among the hills that make the Mesabi, the Vermilion, the Cuyuna, know their continued prosperity and future security depend on this new era in iron ore mining.
It's time for the week's business headlines now from Business North. Cliffs Natural Resources, which manages or has an ownership stake in 5 regional mines, announced a major management shakeup Thursday. Lourenco Goncalves was appointed chairman, president, and chief executive officer, replacing Jim Kirsch and Gary Helverson in the leadership positions. Throughout this year, activist investor Casablanca Capital had urged the company to name Goncalves its CEO. His appointment came just 1 week after a slate of Casablanca nominees was elected, gaining a majority on Cliff's board. Casablanca has said Cliff's American operations are profitable, but the company's foreign holdings have devalued stockholder value and should be spun off.
Adams Publishing Group expanded its holdings last week by purchasing the Rice Lake Chronotype and its companion Shopper publication. Earlier this year, Adams acquired a regional chain of 15 area newspapers. The fast-growing media firm is owned by Minneapolis native Stephen Adams, son of a Minneapolis Star-Tribune columnist. Last month, the company bought 10 community newspapers in southern Minnesota through its purchase of Huckle Media.
Wisconsin Indian Head Technical College President Bob Meyer has been named President Emeritus by the WITC Board of Trustees. The honorary title is given to a president who has served with distinction. Meyer will leave WITC next week to become chancellor at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. During Meyer's time at WITC, the college has been ranked 3 times in the top 10 among two-year colleges in the nation by a national magazine. He also worked to promote technical college education and manufacturing careers throughout Wisconsin. For more business and economic news, visit businessnorth.com.
Call now if you have a comment on this week's show. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message, or send your comments in an email to almanacnorth@wdsc.org. You can also visit the WDSC website for the latest program information, news about the station, or previews and clips of your favorite public TV shows. And Denny, as someone who grew up on the range, that had to be kind of fun for you to watch that old look back at the taconite industry.
Keep in mind that film was made 62 years ago. That's a lot. There's been a lot of change in the mining industry in those 62 years.
And yet a lot has also stayed the same.
Isn't that the truth?
It is. All right. For Denny and the crew here at Almanac North, I'm Julie Zenner. Have a great weekend.